Hello folks, welcome to my YouTube channel, Watercolor Impressions. Soon it's going to be a festival season. My sister wants to create a greeting card for our friends. Before you start with any cards, you have to come up with a motive. Who is it for, or is it for celebrations, friends, or family, or something funny, or pun, or meme-oriented cards. My sister wants to share this card with her friends, so most of her friends are family. I want something that represents family and cute. So I found some reference on the internet, and this is how I came up with. And before we get on to it, hit the subscribe button so you guys can get weekly video updates from our channel. And let's get started. As I said, it's for family, so I want something that represents family, so I found this reference of three penguins standing together, like a mom and a dad and a small penguin. So I thought I want to make it Christmassy, so I added some ads for them. So for the ads, I'm using cadmium red, and it's a pure pigment, there's no water in it. And I'm also being aware of my strokes as well. And you could see first I'm starting with the hats. And I'm trying to make it as flat as possible. So I'll go ahead and fill the shapes of the three hats, and you could see, and then I'll start with the first penguin. So you can see in my palette there is a lot of dirt in my palette. So sometimes I don't clean my palette for this reason, because I have a lot of mixed colors in it already. You can see there's a lot of green in it and a little bit of raw amber in it, so it kind of creates a warmth in my palette. So I'm also using the student watercolor paper, so it doesn't blend that well, and it also gets dry really fast as well. So I'm trying to rush my stroke as fast as possible, and you can also see I'm also trying to create a gradient from top to bottom. Even though I said I want it to be flat, but still I want to have some gradient in my painting. So that also gives a little bit of depth in our painting as well. So I'm also going over the penguin which is on the right hand side, and I'm doing the same thing. So I'm having the pigment darker at the bottom, but as it goes up, I want to be a lighter as well. I'm also being aware of my strokes as well, because so that I don't go on to the Christmas ads. And you could see I'm trying to increase the gradient at the bottom. And the watercolor does what it does, and what happens with watercolors is it gets dry. And it gets lighter as it gets dry. So now I'm going to go to the body of the penguin. So I'm using NeutralTint or Payne's gray, and I'm also using a little bit of white paint in it, because I don't want the pigment consistency to be a little darker. I always try to create confident strokes by just doing one stroke. Sometimes it's really hard to do it, but once you do it, it looks beautiful in watercolors. And you could see when I come down, I'm just trying to be a little bit careful, so that I want to give the legs. And now I'm adding his hands. There is also eyelet happening on his hands as well, so I'm leaving white bits for it. And I'm also taking all the way to the top to his head as well. And I'm trying to create that gradient. It looks really lighter now, but I will increase the pigment consistency when I want, if I want to. And you could see it looks flat, yet it reads pretty good. So that's all we wanted. So now, as I said, I will increase the pigment consistency. Since there's a little bit of water already in my mix, so once I put any color in it, it's gonna mix by itself. That's a beautiful thing about watercolors. So for the darker pigment, I'm using pure pigment of Payne's gray. So now I jumped on to the next penguin, the father penguin. So same thing, I'm going to do the lighter wash first, then I'll introduce darker wash before it dries out. And I'm trying to make my stroke as confident as possible, and I'll bring it all the way down to the ground. So before it dries out, I'm using NeutralTint again, Payne's gray, so it just blends by itself. So now I'm jumping on to the baby penguin. So you start with a light wash. And you can also see I left some white bits between the edge of the penguin and the hat, and you will see at the end why I did that, and it will make sense. And you could see I used a little bit of raw amber and the leftover palette, and I'm also mixing a little bit of NeutralTint in my wash for the baby penguin. And you could see as soon as we painted the shapes, the old greeting card came alive. Since I added a darker pigment already, so once I go over it, it just blends by itself. And on the bottom, I increase the pigment consistency because when any objects meets ground, it will create a cast shadow. So I'm trying to add that by just adding a little bit of NeutralTint at the bottom. So I'm taking clean water, and I want to create the gradient on the dark penguin as well. So I'm going to use a darker pigment on the edges, and I'm going to use clean water to create the gradient as well. The baby penguin looked a little bit flat, so I want to increase a little bit of gradient for him as well. So I used a NeutralTint, a little bit of white in it, and I created that as well. And I also added a little bit of second wash on the father penguin because he looked really flat as well. So most penguins have this kind of orange color happening in their face. So I added using Cadmium Yellow. I'm also using a little bit of Cadmium Yellow and a little bit of Cadmium Orange in it to get that pigment consistency. You can see I'm also mixing white in my Cad Orange. You will see in a second because I want that to be a little bit lighter on the peak. So now I'm taking Cadmium Red and I'm going to write this lettering. If you're really good at lettering, do this, or else like bring it to Photoshop and you can add some lettering there as well. Since I want this to be printed, so I'll be taking to the Photoshop and I will just add the details after it. And you'll also see the final product with the new designs I've added for the Merry Christmas as well as for the trees. And there's nothing that represents Christmas is golden stars and Christmas trees. So I'm adding some little bit of golden stars using yellow ochre. I'm just fixing the lettering using Cadmium Red. So now I want to jump onto the trees. For the trees I'm using Cerulean Blue and Cadmium Red. Since I have the mix already in my palette, so I don't have to mix it. So I'm just using a little bit of water and mixing it to get a pigment consistency. And I just painted the trees. As I said, I left some white bits for the head and the hat. Now you will see I'm using a ballpoint pen, or any kind of pen would work for this. I'm just trying to connect those shapes to the head. That's it. As simple as that. But I'm trying to make sure I go over the silhouette, not going over it. And I'm just adding a star at the end of the hats. And that's it, folks. It's simple as it is, and we created a family card for family, and that's also really cute. And when I looked at it, it looked really flat, so I want to add some ground shadows. For the ground shadows, I'm using Payne's Gray and a little bit of yellow ochre in it. Now it's your turn to come up with your own greeting card. Hope this video helps you and shows how easy it is to create a card. But if you have any questions, let me know in the comments or write me at watercolorimpressions@gmail.com. If you ended up painting a greeting card, share it with me, and I love to share it with my subscribers as well. Before you go, hit the subscribe button so you guys can get weekly video update from our channel. And good luck with your painting, folks.